Everyone having a right to a safe and stable home benefits us all. I come with no other agenda than desperately trying to help people who are in need. And I see that as part of my role, is that why else would I be here if I'm not using this role properly to influence and help people where I can.
Princess Diana wrote a letter to Prince William, begging him to stay kind when life got hard. It was lost for years in a dusty box, almost thrown away like trash. William grew up without knowing the words his mum had left for him. Tune in, because when the letter finally came out, it showed a truth the palace tried to bury forever, a quiet discovery in London. The letter did not announce itself. It slipped quietly into the world. In the heat of a July afternoon in 2004, buried among dusty auction catalogues and forgotten memorabilia, something extraordinary waited to be noticed. No headlines screamed, no news flashes interrupted broadcasts, just a simple entry in a London auction house ledger, handwritten letters, Princess Diana. But inside, a hidden truth was ready to break free. The auction was small, almost an afterthought. Organized by SS, it featured personal correspondence from Violet Collison, a woman unknown to the public but vital behind the scenes. Violet had worked for the Spencer family for decades, a steady presence, trusted and discreet. Tucked among Violet's collected papers was a letter that didn't belong in the usual heap of royal memorabilia. It wasn't addressed to Violet herself. It spoke instead of Diana's eldest son, carrying the kind of urgency only a mother could summon. Raw, unfiltered, and heartbreakingly real. This wasn't Diana polished for public view. This was the woman whose laughter rang too loudly in the garden when her boys tumbled over each other. The mother whose fingers trembled as she wiped away their tears. The woman who lived with the constant, gnawing fear that the gilded walls protecting her sons might someday turn into prison bars. There were no photographers at the discovery, no news cameras whirring to capture the moment. Only a few auction workers and a quiet realization: this was more than a letter. It was a heartbeat, preserved. The earliest letters painted a portrait of a young woman swept into a storm. July 1981, mere weeks before her wedding to Prince Charles. Chaos reigned. Palace staff buzzed like frantic bees. Dress fittings crammed into every spare hour. Yet amid the turbulence, Diana wrote about the heat, about her efforts to stay calm while the world around her spun faster and faster. It was not the stuff of headlines, it was the stuff of life. Her words revealed vulnerability and humor, reminding anyone who read them why she had captured the world's heart in the first place. Over the years, the handwriting evolved, the tone darkened. Light-hearted asides faded, replaced by something more weighted, more cautious. Motherhood wove itself through her letters, stitching gravity into every sentence. By the late 80s, the fairy tale sheen had worn away. The strains of palace life, the cracks in her marriage, all left their marks. Yet through it all, one thing remained unbroken: her devotion to William and Harry. One letter from June 21st, 1989 stands out. Written on the formal, rigid stationery of Kensington Palace, it was a thank you note to Sergeant George Plum of the Special Escort Group. She thanked him for organizing a motorbike show for William's 7th birthday. Diana's neat handwriting radiated gratitude, not for the spectacle itself, but for the joy it had brought to her son and his friends. Beneath her signature, 2 small scribbles appeared: William and Harry. Their childish signatures, innocent and crooked, were a sudden punch to the heart. They revealed a family trying, even fleetingly, to live simply and happily, untouched by crown or cameras. No royal photographers immortalized this moment, no documentaries dissected it. It was a quiet thank you, sent off without fanfare, a small snapshot of a life that sought normalcy in a world of gold-plated obligation. In every rediscovered letter, Diana's inner struggle flickered into view. The public, Diana and the private Diana, wrestled on the page. She wanted her sons to grow up understanding compassion, not just tradition. She wanted them to know the world beyond palace gates. According to her former bodyguard, Ken Worf, Diana's rebellion was subtle but fierce. She oiled her boys into public buses. She whisked them through fast food drive-thrus. She let them laugh too loudly and worry too little about royal protocols. These weren't random acts of whimsy. They were deliberate choices, a blueprint for a different kind of prince. Her anxieties seeped into her letters, not through sweeping laments, but through casual remarks that betrayed deeper fears. Would her boys retain their kindness? Would the machinery of monarchy grind them down into cold, distant figures? Even as her marriage unraveled, as her public life became tabloid fodder, Diana's written voice remained steady. She did not lash out, she did not accuse. Instead, her letters reached out toward her sons, clinging to the hope that ink on paper could hold a family together when everything else was falling apart. Historians and fans sifted through these letters with different eyes. Some hunted for scandal, others hunted for history. But those who read closely found something else entirely. A mother's unyielding love, tucked into the margins of a collapsing royal world. When these letters re-emerged, William was no longer a boy. He was a young man at university, navigating a life permanently shaped by cameras and expectations. The timing was impossible to ignore. 7 years had passed since Diana's death. 7 years since 2 boys had followed a coffin through London streets. 7 years since a light went out, leaving behind an aching void. The monarchy, still trembling under the weight of past mistakes, had yet to fully come to terms with Diana's impact. And now, unexpectedly, these letters surfaced, tangible proof that her voice, her love, her spirit had not faded. The letters were not relics, they were reminders. They proved that every polished portrait of Diana smiling at her sons had a raw, beating heart behind it. They proved that duty had not extinguished love. The royal family, with all its rigid silences, could not erase what these pages revealed. A woman who cracked open the marble facade to let warmth through. A woman who believed that affection, not cold formality, would be her son's greatest armor against the weight of a crown. If anyone in the royal establishment hoped that time would soften Diana's legacy, they were mistaken. Her voice, captured not in speeches but in scribbled letters, remained vivid and undeniable. In each folded piece of stationery she fought, quietly, persistently, for her sons to have a chance at real happiness. In every casual "thank you," in every worry aside, Diana stitched together a private world for William and Harry. A world where laughter mattered more than protocol, where kindness was valued above appearance, and where love could, just maybe, outweigh the crushing demands of heritage. And somewhere, beyond auction houses and catalogue pages, her sons listened still. A mother's silent battle. The world crowned Diana with 100 titles: fashion icon, humanitarian, rebel princess. But none mattered more to her than one simple truth: she was a mother. That devotion seeped into every moment she shared with William and Harry, even when no cameras followed her. Inside palace walls thick with tradition, Diana fought invisible battles. Every day she pushed against centuries of rigid expectations that dictated how a royal mother should behave. Distant, formal, an occasional figurehead at special events. Diana refused. She rewrote the script. She took her boys into the real world, to amusement parks, to burger joints, to homeless shelters. She showed them life beyond polished halls. She taught them to shake hands with strangers without fear, to hug without hesitation, to see suffering and not turn away. Some inside the palace called it reckless. Diana called it essential. She didn't want her sons floating above the world like distant stars. She wanted their feet planted in the soil of real life. She fought tooth and nail to make sure they experienced it firsthand. Even as her marriage fractured, even as tabloids gnawed at her reputation, Diana never wavered. William and Harry remained at the center of her universe. The media, once captivated by Diana, turned on her with a hunger that knew no limits. Paparazzi shadowed her every move. Rumors bloomed like weeds. Lies piled atop lies, drowning out the woman behind the headlines. Diana understood the game. She knew the public glimpsed only fragments, grainy photographs, sensational sound bites. The truth of her family, of her motherhood, was being shredded before her eyes. So she clung tighter to her sons. She negotiated with palace officials to arrange formal photo sessions. First day of school portraits, carefully staged family moments, a controlled glimpse into William and Harry's lives, traded like currency for fleeting privacy. It was a deal with the devil, and Diana knew it, but she made it willingly, anything to shield her boys. Behind closed doors, her protectiveness burned fierce. If a photographer crossed a line, if a journalist lurked too close, Diana stepped between her sons and the world like a lioness. She demanded boundaries. Even when the palace hesitated, she stood firm. Andrew Morton's explosive biography, Diana, Her True Story, would later peel back the gilded wallpaper to reveal the depth of her struggle. Diana was not merely battling paparazzi. She was battling an entire system, an ancient, suffocating institution that demanded compliance without compassion. Yet through it all, bitterness never bled into her private letters. Her notes to friends and staff carried no venom, only hope. Hope that William and Harry could forge a new kind of royal life, one where kindness mattered more than lineage, where empathy carried more weight than a crown. In every word she wrote, you could feel the urgency. A mother racing against an unrelenting machine, fighting to keep her sons human in a world designed to make them statues. She introduced them early to her charity work, not for cameras, not for press clippings, but because she believed it would plant something enduring inside them, seeds of compassion, seeds of courage. She took William by the hand and led him through homeless shelters, immunodeficiency hospices, and crowded hospital wards. She let him see pain up close. She let him witness resilience. She let him glimpse humanity stripped bare. She did not shield him from the world's harshness. She prepared him for it. And as William grew, the traces of Diana's hand became unmistakable. On the way, he met strangers' eyes with steady warmth, in how he listened without rushing, in how he comforted the grieving without waiting for a script. The rediscovered letter, found years later in a forgotten collection, was more than ink on paper. It was a time capsule, a window into Diana's dreams, not dreams of grandeur or dominance, dreams of decency. The world mourned Diana for many reasons: her beauty, her charisma, her rebellion. But beneath the public mourning lay a deeper, more intimate grief, the knowledge that two young boys had lost not just a mother, but their fiercest protector. After her death, the royal family attempted to close ranks, to resume the rituals of continuity. Yet the hole Diana left behind could not be plastered over. William and Harry became living testaments to her, proof that her influence had not been extinguished by tragedy or tradition. And still, the question lingered. Without her steadying presence, could they remain true to the path she had carved for them? As the years stretched on, the echoes of Diana's lessons grew louder. William chose to attend the University of St. Andrews, far from London's relentless gaze. He shared a modest house with friends. He cooked his own meals. He did his own laundry. Choices that startled those who expected another prince preserved behind palace walls. It was not the royal way. It was the Diana way. When William fell in love with Catherine Middleton, a woman from outside the aristocracy, it became even clearer. William intended to live by different rules: love over duty, authenticity over image. Every step he took seemed to trace back to those quiet lessons his mother had fought to give him. Lessons inked into his soul long before the cameras caught on. Be kind, be real, be brave. The lost letter, that fragile page of handwritten devotion, offered proof of what many had always suspected. Diana's greatest legacy was not a designer gown, not a charitable cause, not a bold headline. It was her sons. They were the living embodiment of all she had fought for. They were proof that love, when fiercely and fearlessly given, could outlast even the coldest traditions and the deepest tragedies. And as the world turned its gaze once more to that single page, creases and smudges and all, the truth stood clear and unshakable. Diana's voice had never been silenced. It had only been waiting. And now, it has been heard again. Echoes in the palace walls. The palace was not built for change. Its thick stone walls had witnessed monarchs rise and fall, traditions hardened, and centuries stretch out like endless corridors. When Diana arrived, she brought something that defied the weight of all that history. She brought humanity, not wrapped in grand gestures, but stitched into every smile she gave, every hand she held. And even years after her death, those echoes could not be silenced. Every letter she wrote, to friends, to staff, to her sons, carried the same quiet defiance. She refused to become a cold symbol. She insisted on remaining flesh and blood. That insistence left fingerprints on everything her sons touched, a whisper behind every step they took. After Diana's death, the monarchy doubled down on appearances. Public engagements grew more choreographed. Smiles became practiced, statements polished, reactions measured to the second. Images were managed until they shone, hollow and distant, severed from real life. But William carried something different. He moved through royal life with a softness in his eyes that didn't match the cold glitter of the crown. It was as if a whisper traveled with him, a quiet reminder from his mother of who he was meant to be and of the cost of forgetting. The lost letter unlocked that memory. It explained why he crouched to speak to children eye to eye, why he lingered at hospitals long after the cameras stopped, why he chose empathy over etiquette, humanity over posture. He wasn't rebelling, he was remembering. Meanwhile, Harry channeled their mother's spirit differently. Where William leaned into quiet persistence, Harry chose boldness, noise, confrontation. Different paths, but the same route, the same lessons pressed into their hearts by a mother who refused to let distance define love. Inside the palace, the tension grew. Some saw Diana's lingering influence as dangerous, an invitation to unpredictability in an institution built on control. Where the monarchy valued distance, Diana had taught connection, taught that love was not weakness but armor. As William took on greater royal responsibilities, the old guard watched carefully. Would he conform, or like his mother, would he tilt the axis just enough to let something real shine through? For a time, William appeared to balance the impossible. He waved at crowds, smiled for cameras, read speeches crafted down to the last word. Yet moments of unfiltered humanity slipped through. A candid comment on mental health, a spontaneous joke too warm to be rehearsed, a look of real pain when tragedy struck. And each time the mask slipped, Diana's spirit stepped into the light. The resurfacing of her letter cracked open the polished facade. It reminded the world that William was not just a polished heir-in-waiting. He was his mother's son, a living echo of the woman who had once clawed at the gates of tradition with bare hands. He carried her tenderness, her defiance, her unbreakable bond to real life beyond palace walls. Across Britain, people devoured the auctioned letters. Journalists dissected her handwriting. Experts parsed her words. Was she hopeful? Was she fearful? Was she warning her sons of battles ahead? They searched between the lines for hidden meaning, but the truth needed no decoding. Diana loved her sons with a fierceness no title could contain. She fought to build a future where they would be men first, royals second, men of compassion, men of substance, men who could feel and hurt and hope without shame. And that future was taking shape before the world's eyes. William's marriage to Catherine Middleton signaled more than personal happiness. It was a quiet revolution. Catherine, grounded and warm, brought no ancient title, only a life rooted in relatability. Values Diana had championed and bled for. Their wedding carried grandeur because tradition demanded it. But threaded through the ceremony was something gentler, glances full of private meaning, humor hidden beneath formality, a sense of two people, not two statues, exchanging vows, a future king who dared to love like a common man. Their parenting choices deepened the shift. George, Charlotte, and Louis were introduced to the world carefully, thoughtfully. They were not paraded endlessly. Boundaries were drawn to protect their childhoods, the very gift Diana had tried and struggled to secure for William and Harry. It wasn't perfect. No royal life could be, but it was different enough to be noticed, different enough to matter. Diana's vision was unfolding in real time. Beyond the palace gates, the world spun faster. Social media exploded. News cycles shrank to flashes. Public opinion became a storm, wild, unpredictable, sometimes merciless. Yet William remained steady. He spoke about grief, about depression, about the weight of expectation. He broke the ancient rule of royal survival: show nothing, admit nothing, feel nothing. In doing so, he honored his mother's truest hope, that he would be real, that he would lead not from a throne alone, but from a heart that remembered what it was to ache. The lost letter had whispered its truths, but William lived them out loud. As years passed, as memorials rose and documentaries aired, the true monument to Diana was not carved from stone. It lived in the choices her sons made, in every act of courage that valued feeling over facade, every speech William gave about mental health, every charity he supported that uplifted the voiceless, every time he knelt to comfort the grieving without cameras dictating his actions. These were the stones in Diana's invisible monument. The monarchy, battered but enduring, began to shift, slowly, painfully, reluctantly. Causes Diana once championed, homelessness, immunodeficiency awareness, mental health, moved from the margins to the center. The institution hadn't changed its soul. Diana had changed her sons, and they in turn were changing the institution. Behind palace doors, some advisors still whispered. Diana had let the public too close, they said. She had revealed too much. She had weakened the monarchy's armor. But vulnerability was not a crack. It was a bridge, one stronger than any wall. And William, shaped by his mother's love and guided by her lost words, was walking across it, one careful, determined step at a time. Each step was a quiet rebellion. Each decision was a nod to the mother who had dared to believe that love, not lineage, was what would make a king truly great. And as William steps closer to the crown, he does not carry the palace's cold legacy alone. He carries Diana's heartbeat, steady, stubborn, fiercely alive. A heartbeat that will echo through palace walls for generations to come. A letter that refused to fade. Some letters are scribbled in haste and forgotten. Others endure, passed from hand to hand because they hold something deeper, a glimpse of truth too powerful to vanish. Diana's letter to Prince William belonged to the latter kind, never written for history books or auction blocks, but sealed with a mother's desperate love. She worried not about his future crown, but about the shape of his heart, about the kind of man he would become when the cameras weren't looking and the crowds had dispersed. Against all odds, that letter survived. Years after Diana's death, it surfaced quietly, but its impact thundered louder than any memorial. In a world that had squeezed her into tabloid headlines and tragic myths, the letter stood unyielding, raw, human, real. It cut through decades of noise to reveal something pure. A woman who had fought, in every way she could, to shield her sons from the cold machinery grinding behind palace doors, from a future that valued duty over dreams. The letter was not long. It wasn't filled with dramatic proclamations. Its power lay in its sincerity, mapping out her dreams for William with a sense of urgency that bled from every line. Compassion, humility, staying grounded. Diana urged him to resist the forces that would try to lift him so high he might forget the earth beneath him. It was a roadmap, simple and profound, reminding him that titles without kindness were hollow, and leadership without love was nothing more than spectacle. As William grew into adulthood, Diana's teachings bloomed in him. He moved through royal life with steadiness, but his gaze remained soft. He knelt to comfort disaster victims. He lingered with grieving families long after the cameras stopped clicking. He listened, truly listened, when people spoke of their suffering. A tenderness clung to him, surviving the polish of protocol because Diana had planted it too deep to be scrubbed away by ceremony. Harry, too, bore the mark of her lessons, though in a different key. Where William chose steady persistence, Harry embraced confrontation. His battles with the press, his frustration with rigid palace protocols, his decision to step back from royal duties, all echoed the same unwillingness to be a hollow figurehead. Though his path was stormier, the love and fire Diana left in him blazed all the same. They were two halves of her spirit, the steady torchbearer and the fiery rebel. The monarchy, built to resist change, could not escape untouched. Social media magnified every royal misstep. Public opinion turned in seconds. The old ways, silence, stoicism, distance, buckled under a new era's weight, under a new generation's demand for authenticity. Diana's letter had exposed a truth too potent to ignore. Vulnerability was not weakness, it was survival. William embodied this shift. He spoke publicly about grief and mental health. He championed causes Diana had once fought for: homelessness, immunodeficiency awareness, the struggles of mental illness, with a bravery that would have been unthinkable a generation earlier. He rejected the idea that a prince must only wave and smile. He chose instead to engage, to listen, to feel deeply and visibly. Each moment, a hand on a grieving shoulder, an unscripted laugh at a hospital bedside, was another step along the path Diana had imagined for him. William wasn't rebelling against the monarchy. He was reshaping it from the inside, wielding compassion like a quiet flame through halls built for ceremony. The world's understanding of Diana shifted too. No longer just the people's princess, she emerged through her letters and her son's actions as a visionary. Someone who had seen, long before others dared to admit it, what the monarchy could become if it embraced vulnerability and humanity. Her once radical ideas, authenticity over artifice, empathy over distance, now formed the very foundation of the royal family's modern image. William's marriage to Catherine Middleton solidified this change. Their relationship was not about strengthening noble bloodlines. It was about shared values, mutual respect, and a belief that royalty must serve, not rule from untouchable heights. Their partnership reflected Diana's dream, a monarchy grounded in humanity, one that could be touched by those it served. Their approach to parenthood continued the transformation. George, Charlotte, and Louis were introduced to public life cautiously, with a steady hand guarding their privacy. No overwhelming parades, no endless photo calls. The balance Diana once tried, offering glimpses but guarding the soul, lived on in William and Catherine's choices. It wasn't a perfect evolution. Mistakes were made, pressures endured, conflicts arose, but it was different enough to be seen, to be felt, a gentle but undeniable reshaping of centuries of tradition. Meanwhile, anniversaries of Diana's passing drew thousands to Kensington Palace. Memorial gardens bloomed. Documentaries re-examined her life with new reverence. Yet none of these tributes captured her legacy as completely as her son's quiet revolutions. Every speech William gave about mental health, every charity he lifted into the light, every honest moment that defied the script, these were Diana's monuments. The monarchy, battered by public scrutiny but enduring, slowly adapted. Causes once considered too controversial now became royal priorities. The institution didn't change overnight. It didn't change willingly. It changed because Diana had changed her sons, and they, through steady, sometimes painful steps, changed the very currents of the monarchy itself. Behind palace doors, some advisors still fretted. Diana had let the public too close, they said. She had exposed the monarchy to emotional turbulence. But vulnerability, Diana had understood, was not danger. It was a connection. It was survival. And William, carrying her letter's lessons in every breath, walked that bridge with a sure, steady pace, one step for every hope his mother had scribbled onto that fragile page. The lost letter acted as more than a memory. It became a beacon, not just for William, but for a monarchy that desperately needed to find its way through a changing world. Diana never set out to dismantle the crown. She set out to humanize it, to make it something that could be loved, not merely obeyed. She believed survival would come not through glittering displays, but through honest hearts daring to stand exposed. Hearts willing to bleed if that was what it took to stay real. Today, as William steps further toward kingship, the question of Diana's influence is not if it will endure. It already does. It pulses through every cause he lifts, every life he touches, every decision he makes to speak with vulnerability instead of guarded ceremony. History will remember many things about Diana, her beauty, her scandals, her tragic end. But her deepest revolution was never about appearances or rebellion for its own sake. It was written in ink. It was sealed with love. It was carried forward by the steady human beat of a monarchy that at last dares to show its heart. Some revolutions are fought with swords, others are fought with letters. Diana's revolution was written in both love and loss. And it is still being built today, step by step, by the sons she loved beyond crowns, beyond tradition, beyond time. What if the real revolution Diana started wasn't about breaking royal rules, but about teaching her sons that real power lies in kindness? Leave your thoughts in the comments, like, and subscribe for more.